Welcome to Artist Sessions. Today we're going to be visiting with artist and quilter Paula Golden. Hi Paula, welcome.
Hi Rhonda, thank you for inviting me to do this interview for the Alexander Blackhouse Cultural Center.
Absolutely, and we are social distancing. I don't think we're social distancing, we're just physical distancing. I think we've all learned to connect in different ways, but anyway, so this is a part of our just reaching out to artists, and we really want to get to know you better. And I know you're an artist and a quilter, so maybe you can talk about how you started into quilting, the other types of art you do.
Right. I come from a sewing background. My grandmother and my mother sewed, but nobody made quilts because I'm from a German background and we used feather beds. And I grew up in Germany, the child of a Department of Defense employee, and grew up in Germany. And so when I came back to the United States to finish college, I had a lot of time on my hand. I didn't know how to drive, didn't have a TV. And so I did hand sewing and crewel and embroidery projects. And I finally figured out I'd like to try something more. And I thought, well, I'll make a quilt. And I have no idea over 45 years ago why this American handcraft appealed to me, except it seemed to be something American with a good tradition on it. And so I gathered some scrap fabrics, who knows from where, sewed them together, and it didn't look like a quilt. And I remember it going sort of that, and it was about that size, and I trashed it and thought, okay, well, that doesn't look like this image of a quilt, even though I don't think I had ever seen a quilt before in my life. And sort of put that away for the next 7-8 years, and met my husband, got married, and we were stationed in Hawaii. And I took a Hawaiian quilting class, and the teacher there said, every quilt tells a story. And I thought, well, I'm 28, I don't have a story. And she kept saying, you have to create a design. In Hawaiian quilting, it's a folded applique. It's like a paper cut design, like a snowflake, except in 6, it's done in 8s. And she kept saying, it's your story, put your story in it. And, 2 months into a 3-month class, I'm like, just give me a pattern. And she was insistent that we create something that was original. And so, yeah, I whined. Without glasses of wine, I just whined. And so I finally created it. And I don't want to say the trauma, because cutting paper out isn't trauma by any means. But that design process of creating an idea from your head and transferring it into some type of form that you could actually see was really important. And it has been part of my process since that time period, because every quilt tells a story. And if you come across a quilt that visually does not appeal to you, go, it's an ugly quilt. And the idea is that somebody took the time by hand or machine to create something that was of use, something of beauty, a special gift for somebody that either wrapped a newborn or wrapped a person who had passed, that was accompanying them to their next stage, is something special. And it's up to us as the viewer to look for the beauty, even though it may not be easily apparent, to find the story.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I know that you've gotten very good at telling stories through your quilting. And so you sent us a video that we asked you to send us. And so we're going to put that in here as well, so that you describe beautifully, what the story is in that.
Women's Landscape deals with how, as women age, they disappear from the advertising market. Most of the women with gray hair that are featured in advertisements are actually women who have gone prematurely gray, so they've got an extra vitality to their physical stature in appearance. Very rarely will you see a woman over 60, probably even 50, featured in a beauty or a clothing advertisement. In this piece, a waterless lithography image of my skeleton was transferred to fabric and then quilted by machine. As you look at the piece, you can see the vibrancy and then the slow cover-up deterioration of the skeletal image over the piece, representing how women are overlooked and disappear from the landscape of advertising, and unfortunately, often from public view. In addition to the change of threads in the skeletal image, the selection of the beads in red and bone reflect the change of a woman's menstrual cycle, going through menopause, finally to not having viable reproductive capabilities at all. Women's landscape.
A lot of us think of quilts as that thing to cover you with, you know, the blanket on your bed sort of thing. So that is what a quilt is to a lot of people. But I've seen enough of your work to know that a lot of it, and maybe even most of it, isn't that. It's very different. Can you talk about some of the other different ways that you use quilting in your art?
I had another really good teacher who was teaching about judging quilts, and she entered a show, and the quilt, the rules said 3 layers, and of course she made a quilt out of glass and confetti and glass and secured the 3 layers together with grommets of some type. Took best of show. Everybody who was a traditional quilter just said, "Oh my goodness." And she goes, "I followed the rules. Nowhere did it say that it had to be fabric." And so my definition of a quilt is 3 layers secured in some fashion. And so one can take paper and stitch it together. I have seen fiber artists that use a leaf and a piece of silk and maybe a piece of paper behind it and stitch through the leaf and secure it to the paper. That's a quilt. Is it going to keep you warm? Absolutely not. But it covers you with warm thoughts of, you know, somebody's ingenuity.
As well as being a quilter, you are an artist in other types of media. So can you tell us a little bit about that? What other ways do you create?
I create in the garden. I love to dig in dirt. And the quilt behind me is in honor of my mom. She loved to garden. And there are a couple of pictures of me as a 2-year-old just covered in dirt, with a little shovel or trowel, and she must have given me some dirt to play in. And I still love to get covered in dirt. But she loved flowers and growing flowers. And so working out in my garden and trying to figure out what the deer don't eat, what grows and blooms and looks good and the deer don't eat. Of course, now we've got rabbits, so that's another whole aspect. But the other type of art that I like to create is making prints, monoprints. And the Virginia Commonwealth University used to have a fabulous graduate program where you did not have to have a Bachelor of Fine Arts to get a Master's of Interdisciplinary Studies in Art. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And so besides taking classes in surface design and painting, printmaking was offered. And oh my goodness, I love making prints and the spontaneity, because with fabric, you deal with how fabric works. You use commercial fabrics or dye your own fabrics. But with printmaking, it's a much more spontaneous type of process, even though when you go to make reprints, it's very exacting. You can't have a mess on the corners. It must be for a quality print, it should be pristine. So that was more of a challenge. You can have stuff all over your hands. And if you know that I like dirt, that part of the process was more challenging, but printmaking is my second love.
We're just wanting to hear what different artists are doing during this time. Are you finding more time to create? Is your creating looking different? Talk to us about what's happening at your home.
What I have been doing is finishing a lot of projects that have been stacking up for way too many years and bringing them to completion. And I have been making masks. I came to the New River Valley mask making group, which is phenomenal. There are over 575 community members that have come out to make masks for healthcare professionals, school bus drivers, workers at businesses, nursing homes. It's just this outpouring of community spirit that is so totally overwhelming. So I was asked to make medical grade masks, and that making sure they're right has given me a focus, and I'm doing that, and I figured maybe in June I'll be creative.
I just want to thank you personally for what you're doing as far as making those masks. I know how important they are, and it looks like it's going to be something that's going to be ongoing. It's not like at the end of the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks that we're going to be able to put those away, that they're going to be something that are going to be needed. And especially for our frontline folks, I know that they're very much appreciated. So let me just say on behalf of our community, thank you for doing that. So I guess the other places, I know that you are actually quite accomplished and fairly well known, and you do speak and you do workshops and those types of things, which I'm sure, have any of those been canceled, or where are you with all of that?
I teach as a quilter, and I don't want to say to anybody who'll pay me because that sounds rather dubious, but I do teach for quilt guilds and quilt conferences. I'm going to say probably 4 jobs for the summer have been canceled due to COVID-19. This is giving time to be creative and come up with classes, and look forward to when those events take place next year.
Right. So have any of those gone online? I know we're all getting really good at this Zoom thing. Have any of your classes or any of those types of conferences or anything been done online?
Not yet. I know I've done some Zoom classes for the lifelong learning locally, and I guess being behind a camera is not easy for me. So no, I have not put my classes online.
Well, thank you for being online with us, because your story is beautiful and we so appreciate you sharing it and sharing what you're doing with your talent as far as making the masks. We look forward to seeing you when we're all able to get together again. Thank you so much, Paula.
Thank you so much, Rhonda.
One of the things that I have done to help me cope with being alone is making masks for family and friends and community members, finishing quilting projects like putting bindings on quilts, and the idea of slow stitch, where one concentrates on putting the needle in, taking a breath, and breathing in deeply and filling the lungs as you bring your needle to the heavens or to the sky. And then as your needle goes back down in, exhaling as it goes to earth. And the repetitive motion of consciously taking a stitch, breathing deeply and rhythmically as you stitch has a calming effect. And women and people have done this throughout the ages in times of sorrow or in grief or in worry, that there's a meditative aspect to slow stitching. And I have found that while I am actually getting some long-term projects completed by putting the bindings on, it has also helped deal with
the uncertainty of our times.